When a U.S. veteran stood up in the middle of a packed press conference and asked former President Donald Trump for a job, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The moment was raw, unexpected, and soon became one of the most talked about incidents of the event. It all began when Trump, standing at the podium, was taking questions from reporters and attendees. The conference was meant to focus on economic policies, but suddenly, a man's voice cut through the crowd. "Mr. Trump," the man said, standing up boldly, "I'm a veteran, and I need a job." A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to the veteran. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters looked at one another, unsure of what would happen next. Trump, known for his quick responses and unpredictable nature, paused for a brief moment before turning his full attention to the man. "What branch?" Trump asked, stepping away from the podium slightly. "United States Marine Corps," the veteran responded, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Trump nodded, his expression unreadable for a second. Then he said, "Come up here." The veteran hesitated for a brief moment before stepping forward, weaving through the audience until he stood right next to Trump. The two shook hands firmly. "What's your name?" Trump asked. "John," the veteran replied. "John, tell me, what kind of work are you looking for?" John took a deep breath before answering. "Anything, sir. I've been struggling since I left the service. I've applied for jobs everywhere, but no one's hiring. I just need a chance." The crowd remained silent, absorbing the weight of his words. Some reporters whispered among themselves, realizing that they were witnessing something unusual. This was not a staged moment, not something planned. This was real. Trump turned to the audience, scanning the room before addressing John again. "You served our country. You deserve better than this." He then looked directly at one of his aides nearby. "Get his information. We'll get him a job." Gasps rippled through the audience. Reporters scrambled to take notes. A few camera operators repositioned themselves, trying to capture every angle of what was quickly becoming a viral moment in the making. John's eyes widened. "Thank you, sir, He paused, clearly overwhelmed, his voice shaking with emotion. Trump patted him on the shoulder. "We take care of our veterans. You're going to be okay." As soon as the conference ended, media outlets exploded with coverage. Headlines ranged from praise to skepticism. Some called it a genuine act of kindness. Others speculated whether it was political theater. But for John, it was real. Within days, updates started emerging. John was contacted by members of Trump's team, and soon, he was offered a position at a company that worked closely with veteran employment initiatives. Reporters tracked John down, eager to hear his side of the story. When asked about his experience, he simply said, "All I wanted was a job, and I got one." Social media erupted with debates and discussions. Some hailed the moment as proof that more needed to be done for veterans. Others questioned the sustainability of such acts. But one thing was certain: John's life had changed in a way he never expected. Weeks later, John was interviewed again, this time from his new workplace. He sat at his desk, dressed professionally, a stark contrast to the uncertain man who had stood up in that conference room. "I didn't know what would happen that day," he admitted, "but I had nothing to lose. I spoke up, and someone listened." The moment continued to inspire countless discussions about veterans, job opportunities, and the impact of unexpected encounters. Some veterans began sharing their own stories online, talking about their struggles and hopes for the future. As for Trump, when asked about the moment in a later interview, he simply shrugged and said, "He needed a job, so we got him one. That's what we should be doing for our veterans." No matter where one stood on the political spectrum, the event was undeniably powerful. A simple request had led to an unbelievable chain of events, proving that sometimes speaking up can truly change everything. John's story didn't end there. What happened next shocked even those who had been closely following his journey. A few days after securing his new job, John received an unexpected phone call. It wasn't from a news outlet or a political representative. It was from a billionaire business leader who had seen the viral moment and wanted to meet him. The man, whose name wasn't immediately disclosed, invited John to his office, saying he was impressed by his courage and wanted to discuss further opportunities. John, still adjusting to his new role, hesitated at first. He had already been given a job, something he had been struggling to find for months. But the mystery of the offer intrigued him. After consulting with his family, he decided to take the meeting. When he arrived at the towering skyscraper in New York City, he was greeted with respect and warmth. The billionaire, known for his work in veteran advocacy and entrepreneurship, sat him down and asked a simple question. "What do you really want to do?" John was caught off guard. No one had asked him that before. He had always been focused on survival, getting a paycheck, making ends meet. But now, someone was asking about his dreams. After a long pause, he finally admitted, "I've always wanted to help other veterans. I know what it's like to struggle after leaving the military. I want to make sure no one else has to go through that alone." The billionaire smiled. "Then let's make that happen." Within weeks, John found himself in a completely new position, not just employed, but leading an initiative dedicated to helping veterans transition into the workforce. He was given resources, mentorship, and a platform to share his experience. What had started as a desperate plea for employment had turned into something much bigger, a mission. Media outlets picked up on the story again, following John's transformation. From a struggling veteran to an advocate for thousands like him, interviews poured in. His face appeared on magazine covers, podcasts, and even late-night talk shows. People wanted to know how a single moment had catapulted him into a leadership role. Meanwhile, the initial press conference clip continued to circulate online, amassing millions of views. Some saw it as a testament to Trump's willingness to help veterans. Others viewed it as a symbol of how a single act of courage could change the course of a person's life. Regardless of perspective, one thing was undeniable. John's story had become an inspiration to countless people. As months passed, John's work expanded. He began collaborating with veteran-owned businesses, helping launch employment programs, and speaking at events nationwide. He met with lawmakers, pushing for policies that would make it easier for veterans to find meaningful work after service. Through it all, he remained grounded, never forgetting the moment that started it all. "If I hadn't stood up that day," he later reflected in an interview, "I don't know where I'd be right now, but I do know this. Sometimes you just have to take a chance. You have to speak up." And that's exactly what he did. John's story serves as a reminder that opportunity can come in the most unexpected ways. It also highlights the importance of listening to the struggles of veterans, to the voices of those often overlooked. His journey, which began with a simple yet powerful question at a press conference, had turned into something truly unbelievable. And for many, it was proof that one bold move could change everything. As John's story continued to gain traction, the ripple effects spread far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Messages poured in from veterans across the country, some sharing their own struggles, others expressing newfound hope after seeing his journey unfold. His social media accounts, once barely active, became platforms for veterans and job seekers alike to connect, share resources, and support one another. Then, something even more unexpected happened. One evening, John received an email from the White House. The subject line was simple: "We'd like to meet." At first, he thought it was a joke, but after verifying its authenticity, he realized that the highest office in the nation had taken notice of his work. Days later, he was invited to Washington, D.C. to speak with key policymakers about veteran employment initiatives. When he arrived at the White House, he was escorted into a meeting room where several officials were waiting. They had been following his journey and wanted to hear his insights. They asked about the biggest challenges veterans faced when transitioning to civilian life, what employers could do better, and how government programs could be improved. John, once just another struggling veteran, now had a seat at the table. And he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. He spoke passionately about the need for better job placement programs, the importance of mental health support for transitioning service members, and the value of skills training tailored for real-world careers. He also pushed for incentives that would encourage businesses to hire more veterans, making the case that former military personnel brought discipline, leadership, and resilience to any workplace. The officials listened intently, some taking notes, others nodding in agreement. By the end of the meeting, several had committed to exploring new policies based on his recommendations. Before leaving, he was given a brief tour of the White House, but what happened next stunned him. As he was walking through one of the corridors, a staff member approached and whispered, "The president would like to see you." John was led into a private office where he found himself face-to-face with the commander-in-chief. The president extended a handshake and said, "John, I've been following your story. What you're doing for veterans, it's important." For a moment, John was speechless. Just months ago, he had been struggling to find work. Now he was, in the White House, standing before the leader of the free world. The president asked him about his background, his mission, and what could be done to further support veterans. John shared his thoughts candidly, emphasizing that while one job offer had changed his life, many veterans were still waiting for their chance. By the end of the conversation, the president looked at him and said, "You're making a real difference. Keep it up." As John left the White House, he realized just how far he had come. His story was no longer just about finding a job, it was about fighting for an entire community. Over the next year, his organization grew. He secured funding from corporate sponsors, expanded training programs for veterans, and even launched a nationwide mentorship network pairing former service members with successful professionals. Companies began reaching out to him, eager to hire veterans and learn from his expertise. News outlets continued covering his progress, with some dubbing him the veteran who spoke up. But through all the attention, John remained the same humble Marine who had stood up at that press conference, simply asking for a chance. Looking back, he often reflected on that defining moment, the decision to raise his voice, to step forward despite uncertainty. "If you ever feel stuck," he told an audience during one of his speeches, "just remember, one moment, one question, one bold step. That's all it takes to change everything." And with that, John continued his mission, proving that sometimes the most unbelievable stories begin with the simplest of actions.